to talk to our next guest, David Lombardi, who covers the 49ers for The Athletic, that the 49ers are not, in fact, landing Eric Kendricks, the former Charger and Viking, like we'd heard earlier this afternoon, on the Yuma guest line. David, how are you, man? What can you tell us about this Eric Kendricks thing?
Well, it's not official until it's official. So a lot of times you'll see from Monday to Wednesday when the new league year starts, these guys actually can't sign yet. Or in this situation, I guess Eric Kendricks could have signed because he hadn't been on the Chargers anymore. But if they haven't signed yet, then it isn't official. And before they put pen to paper on the dotted line, then they can change their minds. We saw it actually happen with Randy Gregory a couple of years ago. This actually happened to the Cowboys. Gregory looked like he was going to re-sign with Dallas, but then he ended up pulling away from that and signing with the Denver Broncos. So now it happens to the 49ers because apparently Eric Kendricks had wanted to play with Mike Zimmer, who was his coach in Minnesota. Mike Zimmer runs the defense in Dallas, and Kendricks preferred to go there. That's what Adam Schefter just reported. So it isn't official until it's official, and I think that the 49ers are going to be back on the market for a linebacker. That's one of their needs because Dre Greenlaw's recovering from the Achilles tear, and they want to make sure that they're insulated at that position.
How big a loss was that if he indeed goes to Dallas?
Well, I thought it was a nice pickup because Eric Kendricks, he's a former All-Pro. That was back in 2019, so it's been a few years, but he still has been a good player. He's decent in coverage. He's a solid tackler. And what the 49ers would have done is paired him with Fred Warner for the time being until Dre Greenlaw got back up to speed. And it's no guarantee that Dre is going to be back up to speed because Achilles tears, especially on linebackers, are really tough. But in an ideal world, Greenlaw would have gotten back up to speed, and then the 49ers would have had Warner, Greenlaw, and Kendricks. They would have had 1, 2, 3 at linebacker. Yeah. This past year, that third linebacker was a weakness after Azeez Al-Shire left.
The Chargers, and we're talking to David Lombardi on the UMA guest line. Chargers released Mike Williams and restructured Khalil Mack's contract so they can keep him on the roster. Joey Bosa's status still to be determined. Matt Money Smith was on with Papa and Lund today, and we're talking about this very thing, that a team could still trade for Joey Bosa, kind of like what we saw with the Mixon deal. Like, if they could get something for him, they may as well get something for him. Would Joey Bosa still be viewed as a need for the Niners, you think, right now with the ads they've made, or would this be a luxury?
I think that it would be a luxury, but I think that everybody would welcome, if you're the 49ers, would welcome a luxury that can be that good. I mean, Joey Bosa, when healthy, and I understand that he hasn't been healthy over the past 2 seasons, but when healthy, this is one of the best pass rushers in football, and you definitely would be able to find a way to mix him in. We just don't know what exactly the Chargers are going to do. It seems that they're shopping him around on the trade market, and if they don't plan to have him on the team next year, if they want those salary cap savings, they're going to have to get rid of him before Friday. That's when his roster bonus of $7 million kicks in. It wouldn't make any sense to pay Joey Bosa a roster bonus and then keep him around. They restructured Khalil Mack's contract today, which is a signal that they intend to keep him. They haven't touched Joey Bosa's contract. So it could be a game of chicken between the Chargers and the rest of the league that might be interested in him. The league says, hey, well, we see that he's got this roster bonus due on Friday. If you really don't want him, we'll just wait for you to release him. Right now, the contract for Joey Bosa is $15 million base salary plus that $7 million roster bonus. So he'd come at about $22 million, which I think might be too rich for the league right now, given the fact that Joey hasn't been consistently available over the past 2 years. I would think that the market rate for him would be a little bit lower until he proves he can get out of this injury spell that's derailed his past 2 seasons. So, especially from the 49ers perspective, I think that if they see him released and they could get him for a price that's, a chunk lower than that $22 million per year, they'd be really, really interested. And of course, anybody watching this from the outside would say, well, he's Nick Bosa's brother. Maybe he'd be willing to take a discount. I don't know if that's the case, but I think that's the very, very obvious assumption to make here that's at least something to explore.
David, can you give us a little thumbnail sketch of the new defensive lineman they've picked up? Because a lot of us, myself included, haven't watched these guys. You're familiar by name, but not really sure what they're good at and how they kind of fit here.
Well, the one thing that the 49ers have really focused on, and I think this applies to all 4 of the guys, is dependability and durability. I think you have to realize they've got a couple A-listers at the top of the room, and Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave.
Yeah.
And I mean, those are the splash guys, but the 49ers, they have the ceiling with those two players anchoring the defensive line. The 49ers went out and said, we need to make the floor higher for the other 6-7 guys in the rotation, because Chris Kasarik likes to play these guys in waves. And the 49ers felt that the floor was too low last year, whether you looked at some of the plays where Chase Young seemed to take off, all the effort criticism plays in the NFC Championship game, or you didn't see great run defense from somebody like Drake Jackson early in the season before he got hurt. They fell off a cliff in a lot of ways, even though they had that top end talent in other spots of the defensive line. So when you look at somebody like Leonard Floyd, I mean, this is the ultimate consistency guy. He hasn't missed a game since 2017. He's played in 108 straight games. I don't think that he is an A-list pass rusher, but he's averaged 10 sacks a season over the past 4 years. So the effort is there, the consistency is there, the dependability is there. I think they see similar potential in somebody like Yetur Gross-Matos, who's played 4 seasons from Carolina, and I think has gotten better every single season. He's got a really long frame. He's somebody that I think can ultimately emulate an Arik Armstead as far as the positional versatility. I think that they like him at end, but they see him able to shift inside on those passing downs and play at defensive tackle. And then, you look at Jordan Elliott, who earned a starting spot over the past 4 years with the Cleveland Browns on a really good defensive line. And his run-stop win rate was really good this past year. So this is a defensive tackle who the 49ers believe can be somebody who improves the run defense that had slipped from number 2 to number 26 last year. I mean, the run defense took a fall off a cliff. So I think that they're looking for Jordan Elliott to really help there. And then Maliek Collins is the guy they traded for today with the Texans. I think that Maliek Collins is not as good of a player as Arik Armstead when Arik Armstead is healthy. But again, Maliek Collins has been much more durable over the past 2 seasons than Arik Armstead had been over the past 2 years. And when the 49ers focus so much on durability, and Armstead having missed, 13 games over the past 2 seasons with a condition, plantar fasciitis, but that may never fully go away. The 49ers were, I think, really keen on lowering the price point of that starting defensive tackle position while increasing the floor. And obviously the basis of a floor is availability. Availability is the best ability. So They like Maliek Collins as a pass rusher, but I think the main thing for them is they got him at $8.4 million, and he's actually been there for most of the season over the past 2 years, whereas obviously that wasn't the case with Arik Armstead.
Very comprehensive. Well done.
Yeah, really.
Let me ask you about Armstead then. The longer he's out there, would it be, because what I'm thinking is, the longer he's out there, maybe he doesn't get what he wants, and he's played here, he knows the system, he knows they have a chance to win here. Would it be reasonable to assume the chances of him get higher and higher coming back here the longer he doesn't reach a deal with somebody else? Or do you think all the players they've signed would preclude that, and maybe he's ready to move on? I don't know the answer to those. I don't know that anybody does, to be honest, but I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, I mean, if he's out to dry for a really long time, then you obviously can start talking about that. But I think that right now, there has been interest from other teams. In fact, right on The Athletic, Matt Barrows just reported that there actually was originally a trade in place between the 49ers and Houston, straight up.
Oh, wow.
Armstead for Maliek Collins, but then the Texans signed Daniil Hunter for huge money, so they didn't have money for Arik Armstead. They had to start shedding some money. So that trade ended up falling apart, and the 49ers parted ways with Arik Armstead. They wanted him to take a pay cut. They told him, probably, I'm guessing, something around $10 million instead of the $18 million that was his salary this year. And Armstead said no. He thought that he would test the market. He was confident that somebody would pay him a little bit more than that. I don't know if a bridge was burned in the process. It wouldn't surprise me if there were some ruffled feathers.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy played through a torn meniscus in the playoffs last year. It's not for a lack of toughness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it takes time to heal some of these wounds. And if he's still out there a couple months from now, then sure. But I just think that he's coming off his best graded season as a pass rusher this past year. So I would think there's going to be some interest in Arik Armstead from somebody, but if not, then maybe we can open up that discussion.
Okay.
David Lombardi, the voice you hear, covers the Niners for The Athletic. So they've gone all in, obviously, on defensive linemen as soon as the free agent season has started. Other things that they need to address, and we thought linebacker earlier today, but obviously that's still a void. So linebacker, I'm thinking corner, maybe DB. We're probably looking at maybe some more tight end depth, just looking at what else they've gone after in the last couple of years. Offensive line on the right side. What do their free agent moves tell you about where their focus and direction is going to be in the draft? Well,
they've only focused right now in free agency on the defensive side of the ball, namely the defensive line, now that you can take Eric Kendricks off the board. I think it's clear. I think that they have seen where the league is at right now. And that is, we've seen a proliferation of really talented defensive linemen. There are more talented defensive linemen than there are offensive linemen in the NFL. That's just a byproduct of the past 20 years that have seen all ranks of football start putting these great athletes on the defensive line. It's completely changed the position, and that's why every team seems to be short on offensive linemen. So it's just basic supply and demand, because there's a lower supply of premier offensive linemen. The price of offensive linemen in free agency goes through the roof. So the 49ers have said, well, there's a higher supply of D linemen. We can get these guys at much more reasonable prices. We're going to spend our free agency dollars on the D linemen, and we're not going to go overpay for offensive linemen. We're going to turn around and attack this position in the draft where it's cost controlled. So I think it's a clear delineation. If they can find a bargain at offensive line in free agency, of course they're going to go after it, but it's just so much less likely to find a bargain there. Now, it's interesting because the Rams are doing the opposite, right? The Rams went out and signed Jonah Jackson from Detroit, a guard. They signed Kevin Dotson, a guard, so they have a starting left guard and right guard. They signed, and between those two guys, their cap hits almost $25 million combined for those two guards, which just shows you how expensive this is. And both of those guys are good run blockers, but they're not world beaters in pass protection. And I think that just kind of illustrates what's going on here. I think the 49ers, that they obviously need better pass protection, but at what cost would that come? I mean, Robert Hunt was the big name on the guard market. He went for $20 million a year to Carolina. When you look at some of those numbers and where the 49ers are cap-wise, with Brock Purdy having to get extended next year, just isn't feasible. So I think that they look at this from a cost efficiency perspective, and they want to wait for the draft for the big O-line moves.
Man, it seems like after this free agent spending, guards are going to pass up running backs in terms of annual average salary.
Yeah, I mean,
that's crazy.
Guard use and the 49ers right now, they're not paying a lot for their guards. Right? They got Aaron Banks on the left side and Spencer Burford on the right side. So to go from rookie deals to paying a guy $20 million a year, that's what you might have needed for a real big upgrade. That's a shock to the system there. So I think they're going to keep on looking at that cost control draft.
Would you think now, how many of so they traded a seventh rounder, so am I correct to assume, and I think it's this year, but do they have 10 picks now this year?
Yeah, they have 10 picks now. They traded their second to last pick because they know that you should not trade your last seventh round pick.
No.
Because that could turn into Brock Purdy.
Heck no. You can get a quarterback with that. Yeah. You don't want to give that away. How many of those, let's assume, and I'm not going to assume they're going to keep all 10 picks, but let's just assume for the sake of argument they do. How many of those do you think would be offensive linemen? 4? Is that too high?
Oh, I don't know. I do, because the draft can go in any which number of ways. I think you got to pick guys that have a chance to make the team. You can't just pick linemen because you want to pick linemen. But I know there's a lot of good tackles. There's some good guards. There's a guy from Duke, Graham Barton, who could play guard and maybe play center in the future. He's really versatile. And you're sitting there at number 31, so you have your first round pick since 2021. You could potentially package some picks and move up if you really like one of these tackles or one of these guards that will go higher up in the first round. I could see that being something that the 49ers do. I don't think that they're going to just pick a bunch of offensive linemen, though. I think that they're going to be targeted here, and they're going to want to get quality over quantity.
So let me ask you this, because this is something that, I don't know, you would know better than I, and maybe you've talked to people. Well, I'm sure you've talked to people. But when they say take the best player available, I'm always for that. But let's say the best player available is a quarterback or left tackle, something you don't need. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, he grades out at a 85. And you want a guard or you want a linebacker who grades out at an 81. Like, what are the margins you think they're working with here? I mean, do you think teams are kind of hard and fast with that? Or because there's so many positions in football, and I know positional value always comes into play, but is football the one sport maybe you don't take the best player available if you already stacked at that position, as long as the other guy you want to take isn't too far down from that player? I mean, I find it kind of fascinating. Like, basketball is easy. Just get the best player available. There's only 5 guys on the court. We'll figure out a way to play them. But football, there's so many different positions and things guys do. I'm wondering how that works.
Yeah, I don't think that the 49ers have ever really took best player available at the top of the draft. Just go back through some of their recent picks. I mean, the Bosa one was obvious in 2019, but even just going back to 2017, that they were like, okay, we need a defensive lineman here. We want to start this build in the trenches. So they went with position with Solomon Thomas. I mean, obviously the pick didn't work out, but I think they were going with position that year. You could go through any of these seasons. I feel that these have been targeted picks for the 49ers, and you have to really think about position and how a guy is going to potentially have a chance to make the 53-man roster. And every single season, as you get better, it's going to be harder to find a rookie that will make that roster, not only make the roster, but also have a chance to deliver right away. So I think that, football is a beautiful sport because the job description and the physical build needed for being an offensive lineman is completely different than playing the wide receiver position. I mean, in a way, it's like playing an entirely different sport, yet you have to bring it all together as a collective to pull in one direction. So when you're drafting, it's almost impossible to define who the best player is when you have so many different guys, right? So many different body types, so many different positions. They're all playing, essentially a different sport. So you have to categorize it by position and you have to categorize it by need, because otherwise you might end up with too many receivers or too many linemen or whatever. So I think the 49ers are always looking at this through the lens of position.
Got it.
I always appreciate the time, David. Seriously, great comprehensive breakdown on all those names, because I know a lot of people, myself included, don't know a lot of the skill sets of some of those interior defensive linemen unless they're big name guys. So always appreciate the time, man. Look forward to more of your coverage, and we'll talk to you soon, dude.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David.
Man. Great stuff. David Lombardi at Lombardi himself.